All right. Well, we're going to start. Do you hear me? It's no. Oh, I have to turn it on. That's. How about now? Okay. Now we're cooking. Okay. Well, we're going to start. Tonight we have four wonderful poets. Here comes someone else. I'm Robert Yara, and I'm friends of the four poets. Thanks to Alyona Grushenkova, who arranged this for us today. And I want to mention that there's a water fountain in the lobby. There's a bathroom downstairs. What else? Some of the poets have books for sale in the back, if you're so inclined. And there's also a donation box if that is something you're interested in. Okay, we're going to start off with Theodore Schroetter, who's a friend of mine since 1975. We met at the Cafe Figaro. And he's a native New Yorker. He's lived in the village, or he lived in the village for a bunch of years. He's read often at CBGBs when they had their readings, and he was a leading anti-war poet in Berkeley during the Vietnam War. And he's been my friend and my mentor for almost 50 years. Theodore Schroetter.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm not going to use this. And I have my clock that says 25 minutes. And I read this last night, so it's exactly 25 minutes. I've been writing poetry since my second year at Princeton. That was 1957. I wrote my first poem. I was at Princeton. Can you hear me, by the way? Can you all hear me okay?
On the edge for some of us aging baby boomers.
So I've been writing a lot all these years. And I'm going to read a few things.
You know, there is no amplification on this, only on this one. This is for the recording.
Oh, this is the...
Yeah,
is this better? Yeah. Or is this better? No? This is better. I hate machines. Okay, we're starting out. I put these in the order that I wanted. Okay, the first one is called Before the War. Miss Terracotta stood in the garden, gazing at the moon. A few blocks away, Miss Venus Flytrap was trying on a new brassiere. On the wrong side of the tracks, Mars Bar was cleaning his rifle. And in the posh section, young Mercury Vapor Lamp lounged on a sofa reading the Cornhill magazine. And that is called Before the War. Now, I lived in the village from 1968 until around 1984, something like that. And Bleecker Street was all alive and very nice. I don't have time to tell you about the movie theater that showed all the foreign movies every day, the 24-hour restaurant, and the wonderful little cafes on the corner of Bleecker and McDougal, but I'm sure some of you know that and remember the Figaro and all those places. So I was sitting down one day at one of those, all by myself, and I wrote this. No title. I am enjoying the last cool breeze, outdoor cafe, marble-topped table, tea. Do you not know that all will be worse confounded soon, as Robinson Jeffers wrote, that this leisure here in the middle village, where Tom Pacheco once played his trumpet at midnight, right in the middle of the street, where Shane Hugh drew a rapt assembly singing Black Diamond Bay, so that the police had to clear the street of traffic, where Shane had one night at the bitter end 17 people at the end of the show on stage. I counted them. Where Mike Tate sang the song One with such force and majesty that you too, the band, would have been abashed. Where Paul Clements, the Englishman, sang his song called Take This Penny Down to Dreamland. All this is soon to be over because of the NYU endless land grab, because of bombs in faraway countries, because, as the sign says, the end is near, because there is no water by this rock, because in the air, bright gods and Tuscan no longer reign over Italy. Here's another one from my time in the village. It's called In the Cold Night. The old man who shines my shoes as I wait outside the cafe is 74, 2 years more than me. $3 or more if you can afford it. The guy who played trumpet tonight in full anti-bourgeois getup with his horn on his shoulder is telling the manager, got to get home to my daughter's sweet 16 party. And the guy from Poland who does the sound here with grizzled beard and an uncertain future, taking a break on the windy sidewalk, tells me he's reading Schopenhauer. This I call haiku, although it's not an exact haiku. But it's like a haiku. Far from their happy homes, shining in the sun, the boys in the high weeds smoking. I have a book that's called, thank you. I have a book that's called Off the Knife. Off the Knife. You can get it via Amazon. I think it's $10. And it comes from this. It's called, well, never mind. What is it about plum preserves that makes them more delicious when you eat them off the knife. This is called What You Learn. By the way, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What you learn. The most unlikely people are geniuses. Fat, not handsome, wearing some absurd gray wrapper. While people clever enough to get rich or onto TV reveal in every word they speak their lack of knowledge, lack of taste, and very questionable morality. Part 2. Spending time with any bum or dog will lengthen out your span of days more surely than spending that same amount of time with any of your so-called friends. Part 3, and last. Children rue rainy days, unaware that those drops are making the watermelons red. Second ode to the Long Island Railroad yards. The cold eternity of the railroad yards at Long Island City move me more than the music, the paintings, the people, or the days. I get tired these December days, unexpectedly. Wake up from a nap and wonder where the time went. Years, once upon a time, there seemed to be. Plenty of time in which to do anything, and never tired until time for bed. One might have done so much. Read poetry, played tennis, fallen in love, those things one reads about people having done. But somehow, time, like the magician who, with a smile, pulls a rabbit out of a hat, there was no room at all in that hat for a rabbit, suddenly seems to be saying, time's up. You're dead now. Perfectly understandable. Tennis isn't so easy a game as you thought. And here are a couple of poems from when I was old, which started yesterday, I believe, or maybe a few years before that. Even now, when approaching the kitchen window in the dark at night to investigate some sound or other, I step carefully around the dog dish that hasn't been there for 25 years. And this is another one of my old age. It was called Leaving the Library on a Summer Evening. The half-moon night, the half-light afternoon, me halfway into the night, pass by the stickball boys. This is called On Poetry. Ever since Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, or was it Lady Caroline Lamb, said that Byron was, quotes, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, end quote, people have been putting up with impossible poets. Look at Rimbaud. But we have to, because without them, how would we find our way? Charles Bukowski, Hart Crane, Gregory Corso are people you perhaps wouldn't want to know, but without them, what would we really know? We can't bear to leave or to lose Baudelaire. We can't leave Laforgue in the morgue. Though mad and bad, they're the poets that we've had, and they tell us what to do and how to go. Sorry, Bobby, about that remark about Gregory Corso. I know he was a friend of yours. I'm only going to read two more. This is in stanzas of 4 lines. Is this better if I'm up close like this, or is it better if I'm back like this? The first or the second? The first? Like this? Machines are so weird, you know. I don't even know how to use the new can openers here. My friend Victor shows me how to use them. The body and the breath stand against the death, but at last give in, for the death must win. What it wins is just ashes, worms, and dust. What we love is not more than what we've got. But the mystery is that in memory and in the will of man, forever we live on. Live and feel and grow, find and make and know all that there is until man himself is nil. Then, when I cannot see what has become of me, there will be no more breath, body, life, or death. Thank you so much. I'm going to read one last one. A few boys late playing in the park, the light 3/4 down, playing basketball, just the best time of day, with just enough light and the end coming soon. Playing better now than before, as the dusk inspires them. In just half an hour, they'll be back home with Mom and Pop, homework, and Grandma, but also memories of the joy and greatness of life. Okay, I'm quitting, and thank you very much. It was great meeting you.
Hey, please sit, there's seats. So the next reader is Ron Riddell, who's a native New Zealander, but lives with his lovely wife Sarai in Medellin, Colombia, which is where I met them. And they were kind enough to take me into their home, where I stayed about a month. And it's a big, big, big apartment. It's huge. Ron's work has been translated into 12 languages. He's written about 26 books of poetry, so he's a serious guy. Also a sweetheart. He's a fantastic drummer, musician, and we have his book in the back. It's called Awakening of Timelessness. Incredibly wonderful poems. So without further ado, Ron Riddell.
Now mai hai mai, tena koto katoa, ko Ron Riddell toko ingoa. Te he Māori ora. Thank you, Bobby. It's a greeting in Te Reo Māori, the indigenous language of my country. And my country, I come from Tamaki Makaurau in Aotearoa, but in post-colonial language, Auckland, New Zealand. Not Oakland, New Zealand, Auckland. One guy got on a plane once in LA, thought he was going to Oakland, California. He ended up in Auckland, New Zealand. So thank you to Eleona, Bobby, and all the poets, and all of you for coming, because poetry is nothing without all of you, without a community. Poetry, for me, started in Greece. This is a poem called Fourth Floor Apartment. Persephone grows flowers. Her room is scented with asphodels that are too delicate even for her to hold. She watches with guarded envy her mother among the sturdy geraniums. And it seems to her that something between them has long been forgotten.
Yeah.
And this next poem is called Blue Love in Florence. When it's time to go and the guard comes to get you, but you're so hooked on Botticelli, you can't move a muscle. Someone might ask him to carry you away, or leaving you for a hopeless case, leaving you to lie with a Donatello, the hard, true form of his craft, tight on your lip, bronze hip to blue. Don't accept that guard who whispers, art is little more than a temporary cure, if at all. These ghostly visions of the human spirit, if you had to spend your time with them, day in, day out, caring for them, keeping them company, tell him to stop, lock up, go home, and leave you in peace. Back to Greece and Russia for the next one. The voice of Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky brings me back to life. He pops up everywhere, waving the flag, urging me on. How he does it, I have no idea. When I look for him, he turns away. I hear his voice, you see, from time to time, but he turns away, reaching for his pen mid-frozen steps, his winter sheets, the tree-lined streets of St. Petersburg. Then he is silent, intent, all ears, as if out of his wintry depths he hears me too, urging him on. Dostoevsky! Dostoevsky! From time to time, I look out my window, but there are only waves, trees, a clock tower, and some ships. I see no sign of him. Meet his voice in the sounds of the street, in the workers' talk, and the factory whistle, and a ship's horn, boom, boom, booming in from the deep. This next poem is for Theodore. So also for a sculptor friend of mine in New Zealand. The sculptor laughs as he waxes down his wood, thinking of Van Gogh trying to pawn a painting, going out, coming home alone, the same brown paper parcel under his arm. Thinking of Vincent preparing a meal, Gauguin complaining, it tasted of turpentine. Thinking of the two friends saying goodbye. No love lost, no tears in their eyes, thinking of Van Gogh waving goodbye, thinking of Vincent's stars in the sky. The next poem is called House of Dream, and it's from a book called The Oracle of Alexandria, which is essentially a celebration of the great modern Greek poet Constantine Cavafis, who lived in that city. House of Dream. White stones scorch my feet. Dreams are already taking shape, yet I hardly notice the shadows stealing round me. I enter the house to rest and dream I'm still walking to the house where I am dreaming. Night has fallen. The road becomes a river whose stones cool my feet. When I arrive at the house, it's empty. Open windows admit the moon, stars, the sea. I dream, the dream comes true. When someone arrives who surprises me, and suddenly I'm no longer the person I thought myself to be. Cavafis calls. He sits by a whitewashed wall, a phoenix tree by a sunlit sea. The sea moves, strews bright petals in the streets, the sandy plates of cafe seats, the golden arches, beloved arms at rest at evensong, when priests imbue their longing. He lays down his pipe, takes up his honeyed coffee cup, a date, a sugared fig, as incense streams through checkered screens of light and dark, his shining art, his Alexandria of the heart. Yeah. Sorry, I need something to drink. The next poem is from my latest book, and there are copies up the back. It's in memory of my father. It's called Last Fires. From the beginning, my father encouraged me, lighting bonfires in the garden, burning off bracken from the back section, then putting on a billy and roasting potatoes. I didn't need special tuition to win my fire-lighting Boy Scouts badge. It came all too naturally. On cold days like this, he would come home pale-faced with quick-fire instructions. Get the axe, boys, and cut some kindling. And away we'd go, splitting and slicing, shaving and thinning, until we had enough to send the chimney blazing, piling manuka or makrakapa on top. Great glee to see the kindling take, flames shooting up like proofs of life. One by one, family gathered round to warm themselves. In his last years, he would sit there, quietly staring, his face flushed by the roaring hearth. "Ah, the fire," he'd say, "my one last comfort." Years later, as I light and stoke my own hearth, I'm tempted to do the same. Yet knowing we all return to the fire from whence we came, I return the matchbox to the shelf. Remembering the tale of the matchbox girl, out in the cold with one last match, a flame in the snow. I turn away, remembering you too, dressed in your Sunday best, your favorite jacket and fine silk blanket, ready for your final fire, your one last comfort. So we're lightening up a bit. I think here I'm going to read a love poem for my wife. It's all right. Yeah. And it's called Dressing You. I would dress you in flowers. I would dress you in kisses. I would dress you in kindness. I would dress you in dreams. I would cover you from head to toe in fine white linen, scented by sea salt, river stones from the Caribbean. I would dress you in rainbows, feather down and shells. I would have 100 butterflies come bring you sacred spells. I would have 100 larks come sing at your door. I would undress you to address you and never want for more. The next poem is for our dear Bobby Yara, who's the architect of this wonderful gathering. And it's a poem that's dedicated to a man who was a teacher and mentor for both of us, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist priest and peace worker. Gone, gone, the song of a bird, the note of a bell, the call of a drum. Gone, gone, but not yet gone. Gone into air, gone into light, into rivers, seas, stars. Gone, gone, but not yet gone. Gone out of body, gone out of mind, out of words, heart, earth, song, gone, gone, but not yet gone. Gone into quiet murmur of rain, into bamboo flute song, into robes of billowing cloud. Gone, gone, but not yet gone. Gone into footprints by the shore, into the leaf body temple, into mountain lake stones. Gone, gone, but not yet gone. So we had a conference about what we should call this reading, and we came up with this idea, a place for poetry, 3 modern voices. But I said to Bobby, I said, well, maybe it should echo what you had to say to me when we first met in Medici, and I told him I was a poet. And he said, well, it's a tough racket you're in, kid. So this is about the racket. It's a poem called The Daisy Chain Children. If poetry can still find a home, nothing's impossible. No mission, no discovery. It's just a matter of making space, pushing back the furniture, drawing back the curtains, letting light in from the sea. Then going to the window, opening the palm of your hand to let birds come and feed on morsels that you've saved them. The remains on your desk, a blank sheet, head and tail empty but singing endless possibility. The yachts like butterflies, dancing across the harbour, and you getting ready with the daisy chain children to walk upon the water. So I'm coming back to this book, Awakening to Timelessness, and the poem here is called Sometimes There's a Timelessness. Sometimes there's a timelessness about scenes, events, occurrences, including the long gone, the long dead, including the neighbor today mowing the lawn with a t-shirt that reads, "Up the punk!" Also the lady who later calls asking me repeatedly, "Is that Mose? Is that you, Mose?" I almost haven't the heart to say no, or at least, who knows? Also, I keep seeing bright lights and new slants, places, sills, things I haven't seen before. At least not in the clear light of day. And this is nothing remarkable, nothing life-saving or endorsing, or maybe is. This pause to ponder the moment of wonder when you notice the generosity of spirit that flows through all living matter. I think we're coming up to the bell, but this is perhaps could be the bell piece, I'm not sure. It's called If I Say Nothing Worth Hearing. Maybe it's an answer to that question you have in your mind. Why am I listening to this guy? Anyway, if I say nothing worth hearing. If I say nothing worth hearing that improves upon this lot, if I amount to nothing but a forgotten note, murmur, if there's no footfall, no recall of this note in the earth, still I remain content, grateful for having a presence, voice, for being a brief witness, and bearing tribute to these tranquil beaches, forests, waking, singing rounds of rebounding songs, if nothing but a sounding board to subtle vibrations, emanating from within, reverberating from without. So it is to live in silent rapture, shape-shifting lullabies of love.
Yeah.
Thank you, gracias. Thank you very much. Very kind, very kind.
So I'm Bobby Yara, if you don't know me, and I started a foundation to help artists called the Golda Foundation, and I've been publishing books, mostly love letters to my friends, and through the foundation, I read a manuscript about of the work of Ira Cohen, which many of you may know. And he was a great friend. And when I read this manuscript that he had submitted for publication and never got published, what knocked me out was his prose, which I knew his poetry, I knew his photos, but not his prose. And so I said, I have to publish this book of Ira's. And then I contacted Danny Rosen, because Danny, who's going to read next, besides being a fantastic poet, he's the publisher of the Lithic Press, which is, they make magnificent books of poetry. And I contacted him and said, I'm going to publish this book. I haven't published a book in 20 years. I need your advice. And I sent him the manuscript. And after he read it, the Ira Cohen manuscript, he said, well, what do you think about us collaborating on this? And nothing could make me happier than that, because once you see their books, and the Ira Cohen book that we're working on should be out within the next 2-3 months. But I asked Danny about advice. He came back and said, let's do the book together. And we've become good friends through that. Danny flew in last night at short notice to join the poetry reading. And without further ado, here's Danny Rosen.
Thank you, Bobby. Walking over here just before, on my way over here, I had a very strong feeling that I wasn't in small town Colorado anymore. I'm from Philly, but I've been living in the West for 45 years, and it's always most invigorating to be in the city, as you all know. Well, a great friend of mine, Neely Tchaikovsky, is a wonderful poet. Bobby knew him. Some of you others in here also knew Neely, and he died a few months ago. And this is, among other things, this is an homage to Neely. And I actually wrote it as a letter to my pal, Kyle Harvey, who designs all the lithic books and does so much more than that. So this is called Dear Kyle, Imagining Neely. Dear Kyle, it was 1968, and we were driving across Iowa, soil of family, gravel of sermon, grandfather's teeth on the breakfast table, having a pipe for nothing really surprises, old news. One day, I walked to the bus stop and learned the word assassination. All the kids with their lunches reeling. A station wagon appeared to take me away. One guy held his breath for 6.5 hours until we crossed the Minnesota line. Idiots out wandering around. Couple of poets in a car. Burning, building, eating, speeding across America. Seasick sailors mid-continent, heading for the coast if east or west, back or forth, both and, young Jack Mueller in the back seat, sonorous, hailing passers-by, giving direction, trailing the tape. The book begins there. Greenfield symmetry stretches its arms and feeds the world with landmines. False summits, Fata Morganas, all desert roads lead back to Iowa with G and Honey and Ted. And you put that guitar down on your knee, looked straight into the Super 8 and said, cosmography, orthography, photography is true poetry. And I said, hey, look, as we flew past a tree full of hanging rocks in the middle of Iowa. Hawkeyes on power poles, Volkswagen Vortex, adrenaline nation grown old before mine eyes, black and white village nights, the buzz of the city streets, African hazards, hanging metals, sizzling neons, bazillion poems, painters, friends and lovers, eeny, meeny, miny, holy, 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 16 ripped landscapes, blind spirochetes spouting waves of what might be sounds, sounds crazy enough when light. It's true enough to drive up the hill and find a parking spot right in front of 219 Andover. Neely Tchaikovsky, lashed to the prow, holding on in the storm, pointing the way ahead. What's that spell? What's that spell? That's what this is called. When the water was turned off but kept running, a bird landed in a dead tree and stayed alive. We called it Bird, as if we knew. And someone said, this is sandstone. And Ma said, clean the cave. And shadows flickered on the wall. And we talked about finger pain and thought, what's up with all the archives built at sea level? And we pondered space-time, how it bends, waves, says hello, breaks in the end, a perfect planet, blue sky, couple of guys reading the Times, another cup of cattail, longing for an atom bath, clean the corks, light the joints, let's go to America and meet some Americans, bird chatter, big top barter, buy a ladder, climb up and jump off, as if we were at Woodstock listening to Country Joe and everyone was giving a fuck.
Even I remember when. Maybe some of you do too. Well, here's a little blip from nearby where I live, which I live outside of a very, very small town in the far western desert of Colorado. This is called In the Dying Dog Desert. Stooped, hobbling, foaming at the snout, and with a tumorous eye, high noon with a smoke, when a tsunami of quiet rolls over what nectar may be hidden within a brittle leaf, in a thin crevice, in the belly, in the heart, in the core of our Precambrian solid and still movement is the stuff of humans, heading up single tracks in a salt wash, walking on white crust on green mud, through a gap in the Dakota sand, beaches frozen and frozen again, down into the Morrison, slanting into the Cretaceous Sea. I imagine a festival of dinosaurs gathered by the river, working together to stop all the killing, extolling the virtues of warmer blood, debating the odds of bigger floods. Well, maybe I'll just hop over here. I'm gonna read this is my, the last book I did. I came out a few months ago, and it was in conjunction with a hanging rock installation that I did in a gallery in Fruita, Colorado. I do a lot of kind of landscape installations with rock and wood and whatever else I can find. Anyway, I once described this as a book from the point of view of the rock, which is in part true, I guess. But I'll just read a little section of it, which starts like this. Fingers on fringes on cliffs, the youth scrambles unroped 1,400 feet up, climbing almost forever and freezing, walking almost starving over the surface, gathering whatever catches the eye, what the pockets can hold on the ridges behind Jack's house, top of the log on the mythic edge, scheming Dakota slickensides balanced at midnight. Budada dreams mud-filling cracks in the playa 1 billion years ago in Montana. Mudcrack man, Ripple Rock man, Crystal man from Sangre de Cristo, Crestone conglomerate, Mudchip conglomerate, Shell conglomerate, Shinneroom conglomerate, conglomerate coming out of my ears in the flood, a fossil hash north of town. First came uranium, then the hanging rock. Hang it to change the world, not at all. Nothing moves, rock remains imperceptible to the eye. Bryce Canyon grows deeper as we speak. Red desert sandstone, blue Humboldt limestone. Where's the war today? Caliche crust on emerald, lichen covers country stone. Witness to deepness, one coat at a time. Calcium rings, granite spears. Diamond shapes above the fold. Strung certainty. The dead lift the life alive. Look, kid. In gray sand, a frozen dollar. Go save it down by the riverbank. The miles smile on the stones, a breeze jazzes it up. Hard to believe Bob showed up with Bill by the fire. Rocks floated over the far horizon, a heat mirage. Ted Lasso got his gun. The wars went on. The rocks flaunted the power of being numb to normal reaction. At this point, is that the ocean I hear? Locked up sounds of naturally occurring solid substances, glued with some sticky atomic stuff, a kind of stretchy goo with electron tentacles holding tight at 500 degrees. Mr. Gabriel Fahrenheit, I declare your meniscus clinging, raising stones in trees instead of leaves. Chained branches, the network spreads before our eyes. Listening to stone slows things down, just kind of sitting around, cocking an eye, an ear. Christmas Day, silent night, power vision, dying moon, so close to full, so close to falling below Joe's house on the hill. Here comes that crocodile hissing, turning from the causeway, raging at the moon under Gemini. It's hard to know how to spell anything at any joint or joke or yoke or old Bill Yoakum, high school halfback, died on the field, a heart attack. The offense lost without his dead head approaching a dumb smile and doilies on his wrist. Coffee's almost here, and the normal killing does not cease. Even where it isn't, it is. In the stories, in the heads, in the characters, in the factories compounding dividends on stolen screams with headaches on sidewalks. This hanging stuff is completely silly. Ape with drill, chimp with cable, self-absorbed stones, hung on the heels of kinks in the mind, sacred act, rock benediction, resurrected lithic shall not suffer, drilled to the core, open to the soul of the stone, relieve the pain of the bound grain, heal the earthen ache, guilty of nothing but gaining not ground, but what follows underfoot. And that goes on. I'll just stop there. Oh, we're doing good for time. Okay. Well, actually, when I was, for some reason, I drove out to San Francisco for Neely's memorial last month, and I got this poem on the way home. I decided I can't stand driving the interstate, and I took a hike. Nevada, with red swimmers on blue waters. It was a dream occurred that blurred into actually lying by her side on a tired morning. The sun an issue, the day beginning to drive across the country, up and down. A bitter back is better than a take your pick. The nation woke up and stuck a finger in it. Didn't exactly think about anything except the white lines and soft roars of 90 miles an hour and the feel of long before when an entirely different geology took hold below local time. Now on the edge of the sun gone downtown with rice and beans, surface tension as extension, if you will dream. He left Reno in a U-Haul. She was hitching back to Philly. picked her up east of Fallon. Past the dunes in the basin, a sand mountain rose over the ridge, and down to the next playa lake. Playa after playa after playa. See you next year near the end of another striped mountain. Windmills frame the cattail eaters hanging out lakeside. Welcome to Lahontan, 24/7,000 years ago. Room in the back, conditioner, shampoo, blast it, plastic, beat it with your goddamn flag flying above what is no longer lake. The shores of Lahontan by Turtle Rock, below Grimes Point. Bajadas coalesce their fine fans to spread and bask in oriental winds. The Toy Takota flash their gaps in subtle, sublime shades of gray, white, yellow, green mineral, mineral me, mineral you, mineral Leonard sings old stone, possible ridges, shadowed valleys. Fill her up, said the big-bellied basin, leaning on the line, at the pump, against the pole, searching out a way to get side by side the old geologist, pacing up the road past almost repose. You could stride right into the sky with Bernadette, desiring through the night, with the right outlook, looking out. The ancient ones pecked on the rock, a chipped message. Hunger over in Cold Creek, a brown maroon dominates, and so I go, and going into it, become embodied in it. The road, the lonely road, the loneliest road. Nothing to do but chalk up and pretend the dust devils are breathing. The planet stretching over several bones piled over a crushed jaw. These Nevada cows really got the short straw. And on the other paw, chomping and thinking, they ain't got it so bad. Romping in a sparse patch, looking for a sweet weed, or at least a wet one, remembering them satellites of love. Exercising the mouth by reading Old Angel Midnight out loud over a gap. Don Juan is up the cliff west of the Lander County line. The New Pass mine dug into a valley filled with caves, lowlands, long rises, quick tops. This era will do just fine right up to the summits of what I must imagine were really big mountains, like Van Morrison in Athens, like the Berlin ichthyosaur, like the cicadas on the highway building up beneath the wheels, like the headlines about how the pavement grew greasy and he just flew off the road in the corner. My heck, they say. How imagination keeps us safe on the summit of Power Pole Mountain, Electric Gorilla Mountain, Macadam Mountain, Madam Mountain moving through confusion around the bend that is this house, Nevada. One more? Okay. Well, I met Theodore sometime in the past year when he probably got my contact from Bobby, and he started writing to me about a lot of things. And one of the things that he wrote about quite a bit was he was critiquing my poems, and I feel like Theodore's been one of my closest readers. And well, since it's summertime and the ballparks are green, this is for you, Theodore. This is called Watching Baseball.
Yeah.
With an epigraph from Marion Moore that says, imaginary gardens with real toads in them. Watching baseball with contempt for it, its simple contrivances, the way it's designed for another commercial break every half inning, the control freak agents, managers, and players' constant rancor at the umpires, the ceaseless announcers, like houseflies when the cows are close, all the scores from around the league, contempt for the season's length, the whole country caught up in the thing, like watching paint dry, say those who describe it as dull inaction of half athletes whose exploits are always about average. And yet, growing up with it, one finds between the lines in baseball something genuine. The old man and the cigar, history, strategy, order. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and sing along, stretch, have a dog and a beer, spill your pop going for a foul, stand up and yell out loud at the damned bums and give praise to the natural human animal in action. Hail young bipeds performing at their peak, grown men in uniform, ready and willing to run through walls, spending the energy of any young warrior, with no killing, usually, no blood. Tonight, the guy pitching is the pitcher who threw a pitch behind the head of the batter at the plate 6 years ago. Big brouhaha, the benches cleared, a punch was thrown, couple of ejections. In the booth, in the stands, in the hanky waving rabid fans, anticipation settles over the field where no love is lost and there could be a fight. The world is not perfect, but a 5-4-3 double play is a beautiful thing to see. The image at once held forever in the mind, conjured up at abrupt times that defy time, like a humpback line drive. The pitcher goes into his windup, looks the runners back, lifts, twists, pauses on one leg, stretches back, exhales big, uncorks at once. His arm bends on the tube in slow-mo, sickeningly back, as if to snap. He throws a curve. The batter speaks with his bat, adjusts his nuts so nonchalant, spits, rubs on the tar, crosses himself up to God, wraps the straps of his gloves tight, digs in, takes a few swings, looks up and sees the trajectory of a white ball arc out into the black night. He bangs his bat on the plate, 2 on, 1 out, top of the 9th, down a run. He takes his stance. Radio dreams of kids in bed, half asleep across the land. The brute grips and tenses, breathes and releases, whips his club around, grabs his woman by the hair, lines one down the third base line. The third baseman is ambushed by that shot. The stalwart at the hot corner can only react. Knowing vet he is, he lunges, snags, leaps to his feet, throwing, and around the horn they go, third to second to first. Game over. The announcer grabs his heart, leapt out his mouth, stuffs it back down, continues to talk. The hawkers of beer fold up their carts. The drunks stumble off to other fights. And a blind man in the stands and can almost see the old home team running off the field so diamond green. Thank you very much.
Okay, our final reader probably doesn't need much introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. It's Edgar Oliver. And for those who don't know, Edgar is a thespian par excellence, is a poet, a playwright, a storyteller with the moth, whose distinctive speaking style is just unforgettable. We met at the Chelsea Hotel about 30 years ago. I came there with my 14-year-old daughter, and Edgar was wearing a cape and looked like someone out of an Edgar Allan Poe tale. And both he and Herbert were leaning over a line of cocaine. And Herbert looked at my daughter, Herbert Hunke, who many of you know of. Herbert looked at my daughter and said, "None for her." The Golda Foundation will be soon publishing original plays of Edgar, the title play being The Ghost of Brooklyn. So look for that at some time soon. Edgar Oliver.
Let me first open this water. Cheers. So, yeah, I sound okay if I'm okay. I wanted to start by performing an excerpt from one of my stage shows. The show is called East 10th Street, Self-Portrait with Empty House. And it's about the adventures that I had with my sister Helen, living in this crazy old rooming house on East 10th Street, where we lived for many years, and just all the amazing lunatics who lived there in the house with us. This part of the show is about Donald Milburn. Donald Milburn was a retired postman who loved vodka, but because the vodka aggravated his tummy, he drank his vodka with a milk chaser. Donald lived in a big room on the second floor, and beside him, in a little tiny room with her own little door, lived a little old lady named Frances Ain. Frances Ain had been Mr. Sharrison, the landlord's wet nurse. Frances was the only one in the entire rooming house, besides Helen and me, who would ever set foot in the bathroom. None of the other tenants would dare set foot in the bathroom. They seemed to have this superstitious terror of the bathroom. But Frances loved the bathroom. She would lock herself in there all day long and scrub away at rags in an enamel wash basin. But in order to get to the bathroom, Frances would have to pass by the door to Donald Milburn's room. Donald Milburn's door was the only door upstairs that had a peephole. And Donald would stand behind his door at the peephole, and he would lie in wait for Frances. And when Frances passed by, bearing her enamel wash basin, Donald would fling his door open, and he would spray Frances with roach killer from a gigantic industrial-strength roach spray gun, while laughing maniacally at the top of his lungs. And Frances would shriek, and she would dance up and down from foot to foot, and she would scream, "I'm going to give you a brain operation." And then she would fling her wash basin, which she had made sure was forearmed to the brim with sudsy water, into Donald's face. But always, Donald would manage to slam the door to his room shut with all his might, just in time to escape being splashed by the sudsy water, which would cause the peephole to pop out of his door and go clattering down the stairs. One day, an ambulance came, and the ambulance attendants strapped Frances to a stretcher, and they carried her away. Frances struggled bitterly to break free from the stretcher and make it back to her room. She did not want to leave, but I guess Mr. Jefferson had decided it was time for Frances to go. Years after everyone else had gone, when it was just me and Donald there in the house, sometimes Donald would call me into his room and he would ask me to go shopping for him, and I would bring him his milk and vodka and cartons of Pall Mall cigarettes. And sometimes Donald would write out lists for me, and he would ask me to go grocery shopping for him. And sometimes he would ask me for chicken chow mein from this little Chinese joint on 2nd Avenue that he loved. And always Donald would give me $5 for going shopping for him, which I thought was incredibly generous of him, and truthfully at the time was terribly helpful to me. And I would always laugh and I would say, "Truthfully, Donald, don't you sometimes miss Frances?" And Donald would laugh, and he would admit that yes, he did miss Frances. I think Donald just loved teasing Frances. Donald was terrified at the thought of going to a nursing home. I think he was afraid, and I'm sure rightfully so, that they would not let him drink in a nursing home. But sometimes I would find Donald lying on the front stoop of the house in the throes of some kind of fit, rigid but racked with tremors, with his eyes rolled back in his head and foam welling from his mouth. And if he could speak, he would ask me to bring him his milk and vodka down from his room, and I think Donald was having the DTs. And then one day, Donald called me into his room, and he handed me a slip of paper with a phone number written on it, the phone number of a nursing home in the Bronx he had somehow found out about. And Donald asked me if I would call the number for him. So I did. And an ambulance came, and the ambulance attendant strapped Donald to a folding chair, and they carried him away down the stairs. I stood in the hall and watched as they bore Donald away. He was very thin. He'd always kept his boyish figure. He was wearing very little, just a few rags falling from his bony shoulders. As he floated down the stairs, strapped to the folding chair, he looked like a religious icon being carried in a parade. He floated down with this odd, upright sort of bobbing, like a seahorse. He looked up at me over his shoulder as he floated down. I know he would have waved, but his arms were strapped to the chair. But he called out to me. He said, "Goodbye. You can have anything from my room you like." And I called out after him, "Goodbye, Donald. Have fun." And he was borne away. When I called the nursing home in the Bronx a week later to inquire after him, they said they knew nothing of him. They said, "Donald Milburn?" They knew of no one by that name. They had already misplaced him. Years after Donald had gone, when it was just me and the cats there in the house, sometimes I would go down into Donald's room and I would sit down on the floor, and a kind of terror would take hold of me. I would imagine going into the closet and huddling there in a corner. I would sit there on the floor and let the emptiness of the room take hold of me, the height of the window, and an old gray futon lying in a heap on the floor. I could stay like that for a long time, feeling the emptiness of the room. So that's from East 10th Street. I thought it would be fun to read some poems for you about New York. I love to wander in New York, and sometimes I write about my wanderings. And a lot of these poems are about Prospect Park. It's one of my favorite places to go. And I think I might need my glasses, so I'll be right back. So, well, this is not really a poem, it's more like a little story. It's called Ice Cold Water. There's a man who sells water by the entrance to the park at Grand Army Plaza. He's a black man with an island accent, a Caribbean accent of some kind. I like his voice. He's about my age, so getting on in years. He cries, "Ice cold water, ice cold water." And sometimes he cries, "Ice cold water, nice and cold. It's good for the young, it's good for the old." And sometimes he cries, "Ice cold water, nice and cool. Make you feel like a mother's children in the pool." I love that. I would love to feel like a mother's children in the pool. Water, water, nice and clean. Make you feel like a brand new machine. Sometimes he cries, "Ice cold water, Gatorade." He hasn't chanted any rhymes for Gatorade yet that I could hear. He chanted some things I couldn't make out. I'll have to sit closer to him next time. Last week, I got a bottle of water from him. I was too shy to get water today. I love the way light falls across Flatbush Avenue in the late afternoon. The light is beautiful when the sun gets low over the park and gold light rolls across. The vast expanse of open space by the entrance to the park is like a bowling alley made for golden light to roll across and knock things down in the distance. Except it doesn't knock things down. The trees across the way, the old clock tower on Flatbush Avenue, rise up gold and glorious against the sky, and the light goes rolling beyond them into the unknown distance. It's a beautiful thing to sit here and watch the light roll away, especially this summer evening, to watch the gold light roll away over Flatbush. This is called the Concert Grove. For some reason, I wrote it in the past tense. There was a place in Prospect Park with busts of great composers, of Beethoven and Mozart. I would sit there. I loved it there because there was much underbrush behind the bust of Mozart where you could pee. There were huge sycamore trees, and almost no one came there, and I could sit there for hours. I would try to write or just be happy sitting there. and Beethoven frowned and looked very forbidding, and Mozart, behind whom almost everybody peed, looked so happy, and the trees grew, and it was the concert grove. And I would sit there and try to write, and if I left there, it would be to go into even darker parts of the park, more dangerous, more beautifully abandoned. There were trees I loved there. Oh, how I loved the trees. Oh, how in love with life I was and knew nothing. And this is called Turtles Deep. I am a turtle, though I don't know where they go in the winter, to the bottom of the icy pond, I guess. There, in Turtles Deep, sleeps a turtle who is me. I am a turtle in Turtles Deep. In Turtles Deep, there is a turtle such as I. He is very graceful and floats and navigates the muck as though he had been these many years, this lost thing I saw long ago. I remember him from having longed for him in my childhood. I remember longing in a corner. I remember longing everywhere in my life, everywhere. Turtles deep, everywhere. Turtles deep. And this is another Prospect Park poem. It's called The Road. There is a road in Prospect Park that I love. It leads from the concert grove to the bridge over the lagoon. It leads uphill from the concert grove, curving slightly, and then it reaches a stretch that I consider to be a lost place, a place along a road that leads nowhere. If you go forward, you will reach nowhere. If you turn and go the other way, you will reach nowhere. Either way along this road, you will reach nowhere. This is the lost place. The road crosses it, leading either way towards no place that can be known. There is no turning back. This is the lost place. Here my heart is at ease. Here I am content. Here I wander. This is the road that crosses the lost place. Sometimes in the summer, I sit down in the grass beside the road, stunned by the sun in the grass, stunned into stillness by the sun lying gold in the grass. I lie down in the grass and feel the hot gold beneath me. I cover my face with my straw hat and feel the hot gold lying on top of me. I lift my hat and look up at the branches above me, at the green of the leaves gone gold in the light. I am content to lie there in the green gold grass. It is a summer afternoon along the road to nowhere. I thought it might be fun to close by reading for you the end of East 10th Street. So I'm afraid that I don't know the end by heart, so I'll have to read it. But this part of the show is about a boy named Jason Bauer. It's kind of amazing I didn't wind up a hermit peering out the windows of the house on 10th Street, but I didn't. One night, I had a visitor to the house on 10th Street. When I was 32, I met a boy named Jason Bauer, who was 20 years old. I fell madly in love with him. We met while both performing in a play called When Lithuania Ruled the World, Part 2, by my friend Kęstutis Nākas, the Lithuanian playwright. Jason was slim and pale, with big, beautiful eyes and a mane of jet black hair. He was brilliant and wildly charismatic, and I despaired of becoming friends with him. Truly, my love for Jason was an impossible love. It was obvious he was not romantically inclined towards men, but most of all, I just felt so old, like the gulf of years separating us was insurmountable. But my love drove me to be bold. And I invited Jason to the house on 10th Street for dinner. And one night, Jason arrived. I was terribly worried about how he and Helen would get along, but they seemed to hit it off instantly, and we were all three upstairs drinking together in the big back room, surrounded by Helen's portraits that looked down on us from all the walls. And Helen and I were beginning to cook dinner when suddenly, after just 2 glasses of wine, Jason seemed to enter into a sort of trance in which very slowly and gracefully, as though hypnotized, as though performing some hypnotized dance. He removed his shoes and his socks, and he flung them into a corner of the room. And then, still very slowly and gracefully, still as though hypnotized, and completely innocently, as though he were completely unaware of our presence, he removed his shirt and his trousers, and he flung them into another corner of the room. And then he lay down on his back in the middle of the floor, and he fell instantly into a deep sleep. He was naked except for his undies. He was white and sculptural and extremely beautiful as he lay there breathing in his sleep, as naked as the nude portraits that surrounded him and looked down on him from all the walls, as regal in his nudity as though his undies had somehow been transformed into a loincloth. Jason later told me that he had been so overawed at the prospect of coming to dinner at the house of the great actor Edgar Oliver that he had started drinking straight vodka that afternoon, and had been drinking all afternoon trying to steel his courage. And I guess he pretty much slipped into a blackout instantly upon arriving, and just thought he was at home undressing for bed. I was stunned and mesmerized by him as he lay there. I was stunned by his beauty, by this display of trust and innocence. I felt as though he were somehow unwittingly enacting before me and my sister all the secrecy and desperation of my desire for him. I would have done anything to be with Jason, anything. Jason loved to drink, and so do I. We drank to be together. I would have drunk myself to the verge of death to be with Jason, and I began to write for Jason as well. At the time, I'd only ever written one play, and I didn't know if I'd ever write another one, but I began to write for Jason, plays for Jason to direct. And Helen painted sets for my plays, the most amazing sets in the world. While still an undergraduate at NYU, Jason began directing my plays for their premieres at La Mama. He was a brilliant director. By the way, I only have this left, not this whole thing I'm holding, unless you be too worried. One night, when Jason had come, as on many nights, to visit at the house on 10th Street, he and Helen and I had stayed up all night drinking, and at dawn, Helen had retired to bed, and Jason and I were still up drinking together in the big front bedroom. Something, probably the desperation of my love, drove us to quarrel. Suddenly, I jolted awake on the bed. It was dawn, but I could not have been asleep for more than an hour. I looked around in a panic for Jason, and thank God there he was, lying on the bed beside me, curled up with his back to me, sleeping. I had to talk to him. I reached over and took him by the shoulder to shake him, to wake him, but his shoulder came off in my hand. His entire arm came away. In horror, I dropped it. I grabbed at his back, but his whole back disintegrated at my touch. I began clawing for him, clawing at the bedclothes, but piece by piece, Jason came apart in my hands, unraveled and disappeared into thin air until I was down to the bare mattress. Jason had never been there in the first place. What I had thought was Jason was just a pile of bedclothes. I ran. I felt the most terrible sense of loss I have ever known. Jason had come apart in my hands, disappeared into thin air. He was gone. I ran to the phone and called his house, and thank God he answered. All I said was, "Jason, come back." And all he said was, "All right." And 20 minutes later, he was at my door. I grabbed him and held him. I couldn't believe he was truly there. This boy who was gone had come back to me. We began to drink again, straight vodka. We drank all through the morning and into the afternoon. At some point, we found ourselves out front of the house on 10th Street, lying on the sidewalk, drinking. It was spring, one of the first balmy days, with a low slanting late afternoon sun. We fell asleep side by side, leaning against the warm brick wall of the house. We were together. A few nights ago, I sat in Prospect Park and watched the gathering dark. I sat on a bench and darkness gathered. Darkness came with the night. It slipped into the mirroring of lamps along the lake. It gathered round the water by the boathouse. The light of stars tried to slip into the water, but was held like a flame on the lake, a cradled, floating flame. Sometimes people ask me if I'm afraid all alone in my house, and I always say, no, I love my house, and I feel like the house loves me. And very often, people ask me if the house is haunted, and I always laugh and say, only by me. But recently, it occurred to me that one day people will say, I haunt the house on 10th Street. But I don't think I'll be there. I think I'll be off wandering somewhere in Brooklyn.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks to the wonderful poets Theodore Schroetter, Riddell, Danny Rosen, and Edgar Oliver. And there are some books in the back if you wish to purchase or leave donations for the poets. And thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.